Hello and a very warm welcome to Back of the Net. My name is Charlotte Richardson and I am your host for this episode of Your Journey. It's the show where we get an opportunity to sit down and have a chat with some of the most recognisable names in the non-league game and to explore their careers to date and to share some stories to keep you entertained during lockdown. And my guest today really needs no introduction, but if you were to look up natural born goal scorer in my dictionary, this man's name would feature very, very prominently. He is part of a very select group of footballers who can say they've made over 1,000 competitive appearances, whilst, by the way, notching up over 350 goals across all 8 tiers of the football pyramid. He has enjoyed a career that every possibly dream of, and can say in the same sentence that he's turned down Sir Alex Ferguson and scored a record-breaking amount of goals for Bishop Stortford. Jamie Cureton, welcome to the show.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for joining us. First of all, how are you and how are you keeping during lockdown?
Yeah, I'm okay. Sort of just dealing with it, really. I suppose it's one of them things you just have to accept the situation and just get on with it. So I'm keeping busy, staying fit. I've got a nearly 5-year-old, so he keeps me quite active. We do homeschooling, and yeah, just general bits and bobs, really. Just trying to stay as active as possible. Try and be very structured and sort of have a plan to each day, so you know what you're doing. And I've been all right, I have to say. I'm quite one of them. If I was stuck in a room, as long as I had a few things, computer, some books, food, I'm all right. I can sort of deal with it. So I'm doing okay at the moment.
I'm similar, and to be fair, I'm really looking forward to this hour with you to kind of delve into your career and get some insight, and I think our audience will be as well. And I suppose this is probably the first time in the biggest majority of your life where you've had some time, a bit of a strange feeling that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been able to do a few different things, concentrate on touch with probably friends I haven't spoke to in a long time. Sort of nice for me, I suppose, because I get so involved in football and so active all the time. I'm one of them. My missus tells me off quite a lot that I don't communicate with people that I've sort of grown up with and outside of that. So it's allowed me to have a bit more time to myself, not really have anything to think about football wise, and spend a bit more time on the phone and doing other bits. So yeah, it's been a bit strange because my life has been football for so long. And it's really the only time I've had off is my summer periods, which you sort of rest, go on holiday. Before you know it, that's up and you're back in pre-season. This will be the longest period of time I've spent in nearly 30 years of not sort of being involved in a dressing room, kicking a ball and focusing on football. But you have to take a positive out of it. So, you know, you try and do different things, learn other stuff. I'm looking at maybe taking some courses and bits and bobs. So you have to just take a positive out of it and try and sort of open your mind to different things. But for me, it's been quite good, I have to say. I've allowed my body to sort of rest and recuperate, still trying to stay fit. And then, yeah, in general, do stuff that I probably should be doing while I'm playing, really, which I don't because I get so caught up in it.
I think you're really right there about keeping structure and like you say as well, for potential coaches watching, we were talking earlier on in the week about the amount of resources and stuff that you can be doing and upskilling right now, and it is just such an unprecedented time, and it's crazy to think that about 2 months ago the season was still happening, and at that time you were part of a promotion push with Hornchurch. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on the decision that the league made to null and void the season. Was it one that you agreed with?
I think at the time I probably didn't. I think the game they did, we could have played. I mean, it got called off on, I think, Thursday or Friday. And I think that weekend we could have played. And I think we had a game on the Tuesday. And I think we probably could have done that. But I think when you see how things have developed, I don't think there was any, you know, at the time you're frustrated. We were third in the league. You know, you get quite selfish and you think, well, it's promotion, you want to play football. But I think because of how long it's gone and we still don't know. I think the decision in the end was right, you know, and you only have to look around, you know, top leagues now are cancelling their seasons. You could have waited, I suppose, because I said in a previous interview, in non-league, not many people are contracted. So clubs aren't really paying out if you're not playing. So maybe they could have waited a bit longer. But, you know, when you look at it, it's the right decision. Obviously, you know, we couldn't have gone and played. We trained as while the season was off until basically lockdown happened. And then we thought, well, there's no point. Because we sort of felt the season wasn't going to start. But yeah, it's disappointing, frustration, I suppose. You've got a lot of clubs, not just ours, that have worked so hard to try and achieve a promotion, and when you're sitting top of a league or involved in a promotion push, and suddenly you get told that's it, you've got to start next season. It's hard because a lot of money goes into it, time, energy, everything goes into that, and the club now has to start from scratch again. So it's disappointing.
And I think even in the time I took to kind of obviously research for our chat today, it's really clear that throughout your career and the decisions that you've made, the moves you've made, ambition is a massive, massive driver for you. And did you ever aspire to have the longevity to your career that you've enjoyed and to be playing in your mid-40s? Or was it something that happened as kind of good practice?
I think it happened as time went on. I've played football purely because I love it and, totally enjoyed doing it. So I've always wanted to play as long as possible. But when I started, 35 was about the cut-off age for professionals. That was when everyone retired and you got your pension and got to that age at 35. I felt I still had a lot to give, still felt the hunger to play. So I just thought, right, we'll keep going. And non-league was never an issue. I've always felt that if I didn't make it as a pro, I would have played with my friends on a park for a pub team or Sunday football. So dropping into non-league was never going to be a problem. And I just sort of thought how long I could stay in a professional game. That was a massive drive for me. When it got to the end of my career at Dagenham in the pro game, I could have stayed with them in the non-league. But I wanted to, sort of proud to want to play professionally in the football league. I was waiting for offers. I had one which got down to basically agreed terms. Everything was done. And then the chairman pulled the plug and said I was too old. So I missed out on a lot of non-league opportunities. So I didn't drop from sort of League Two straight into the National League because I'd wasted a lot of time in the summer looking around. But that was my drive. I always wanted to stay as high for as long as possible, play for the biggest club as I could. What was my options? It's never been money. It's always been, what are the club offering? Is it a big club? Is it a promotion pushing club? Rather than, I suppose, I speak to people now in non-league. I could have dropped into non-league probably 4 years before I did playing at Dagenham. I could have earned more money in non-league than I did earn at Dagenham. But for me, my pride and what I wanted to do was play in the Football League. So yeah, I've always done that, and even now in non-league, I've had opportunities to move within non-league for more money. But I've been happy where I am, or the clubs. I've been quite settled and whatnot. And I've always been like that. And that's what I've tried to do. Wherever there's been an offer, I've always looked at the club first rather than the contract. And yeah, I've missed out probably on earning more money, but I think I've in my view, that's the right way I've liked to do stuff.
Yeah, and there are so many decisions and factors that go into making those kind of calls. And I suppose you've are in a privileged position in that you've enjoyed a lot of time within the pro game, within the EFL and then the National League. One thing I've noticed over the past few seasons in particular is it seems that the National League and the EFL, that gap between National League and League Two is getting ever so tighter. Is that something that you would agree with in terms of the professionalism that we're seeing at the higher tier of the non-league game?
Yeah, I think so. I think as soon as the National League went sort of full time, you've got so many clubs at that level that have all been in the Football League. So their structure, the training ground, the stadium, fan base. So it sort of becomes an extension of the league, really. You could potentially, call it Division 3, really, EFL 3, rather than the National League, League 2. It could be League 3 because there's so many teams within it that are full-time and have, like I say, played at that level. So, yeah, you then get the wages start to sort of come a bit closer so they can attract better players. So yeah, you have league players that are playing in National League because they're playing for a big club and they're getting good money. So yeah, the gap does become a lot smaller. And I wouldn't so much call that non-league for me, the National League, because it's so professional, so well run, and like I say, crowds and stadiums and stuff. So it's not for me that you go League Two and then it's non-league. It's still, for me, a part of the Football League, really. And, that's how much the gaps are closed. And I suppose the filter of teams getting like relegated and staying in that level for so long. There's some teams I used to play against in the Football League, scattered throughout that league. So, yeah, it's definitely a decent standard. And you can see young players coming through and being bought by the bigger boys. So, I consider it, just an extension of the Football League really now.
I really agree with you there. And I think actually, even in terms of the pyramid's reaction to COVID-19, the National League has been somewhat in this kind of period of isolation where it's now made a decision that it's not going to play the remainder of games, but it's still yet to be determined whether, say, Barrow are going to be promoted on merit, whether there's going to be relegation, because I guess, again, it has that professional sense in the terms of money going into it. And I think we've already touched upon it slightly. Of non-league football, perhaps not necessarily when you were in the National League, but when you obviously moved into lower down in the pyramid.
It was different. I mean, I basically was in the pre-season. I left Dagenham. I was sort of just searching around training, and one of my friends was at Farnborough, and he basically gave me a call and said, "Well, I'd like to come down and play." Said it, and I hadn't have a clue, and he said it's non-contract, so you can sign, but you could leave. And I didn't understand that. I've always obviously been contracted and whatnot. And he's like, I went and spoke to the manager, and he said, "Yeah, sign a deal. They've only got to put 7 days in. You put 7 days in, you can walk away." So I thought, okay, I can play football, keep fit until something comes up. So it was a bit of an eye-opener on those fronts, because I'd never delved into it, so I had no idea. But Farnborough was great. I played there till just before Christmas. It's a great stadium, what I was playing at. Going to other stadiums, obviously different. It's not great, but showers are cold. But it didn't matter. There was a football pitch, goals. You just go and play. So I enjoyed it. I played with a couple of friends, Terrell Forbes and Dennis Ollie, who were both there. I'd been at QPR with. So he had a good side there, and I suppose I didn't walk straight into non-league and it'd be a massive eye opener. There was pros there that that I'd played with and stuff, and it was really enjoyable. I thoroughly enjoyed it. The non-training was a bit weird, obviously not training full time and training on evenings I found difficult, because I was used to getting up, going to training, being done by the afternoon, where you then get to a point where you're working, then you go and train, and you're not starting training until 7-8 o'clock in the night. So they were all things I had to sort of, I suppose, train my mind back to get used to, and my body, because it's different, especially when I started working myself and then thinking I've got to train tonight and getting your motivation going. But it's been really enjoyable. The lads have been great. I've been accepted by all the teams I've played for. The fans have been good fun. I get a lot of banter. You can obviously hear a lot more as well. And you're a lot more in touch with them. You go in the bar after a game and there's food laid on, and you sit and chat to fans and stuff. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. For me, it's been sort of weaning me off of retiring completely. So rather than come from being full-time and finishing, going into non-league and sort of still playing, it's sort of helping me eventually for when I do retire. But it's been thoroughly enjoyable. This is my 4th season now, I think, in non-league, and I've loved every minute of it. Been to some good places, some different places I didn't think I'd ever go to and play. But yeah, it's been good. There's been some bits in it that I don't agree with, and certain styles, certain things that go on, because I'm so professional in my game, and I've liked to, when I've been in non-league, is be as professional as possible. And I know that people can't do that, so it's hard for me to get used to players, especially that weren't like me. But then I then realised that that's their second job. They have a main job, which is their life. Football isn't, and that's their sort of breakaway and stuff, where for me football was life. And I suppose that took time to get used to, of people's attitudes towards it, but then I understood why, and it's been fine. Like I say, I've really enjoyed it, and I'd recommend it to pros that are coming out of the game, if they want to keep playing and still want to feel a buzz of football. Non-league is great, really. Well, it has been for me, definitely.
And during this unprecedented time where we get an opportunity to reflect, I, for one, didn't realise how much I depended upon football and how much of an absence it has on my life. But for English football, I suppose the non-league pyramid is really, truly unique. It's phenomenal, and the crowds that they get. And I, for one, it took me a long time to get into non-league football, but actually it really is kind of an untapped source of entertainment. And like you were saying there, you'd recommend it to any of your former teammates, because it can be just as entertaining, and there are teams now as well that are looking to play football, but also in terms of the physicality and stuff like that, it can be a great form of entertainment, and for anyone really that just loves the game. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, there's so many different styles. I think non-league was looked at a while ago as sort of older players, a bit overweight, physical and stuff. But I think as it's, especially even the 4 years I've been in, it's changed so much. You get a lot of academy players that have been released that drop into the system. There's a lot of ex-pros now that are managing teams, so their philosophies are different. So they try and play football. So you're getting a lot of good players. It's younger, it's fitter, and it's good football, I would say. I've played in obviously the bottom, what was it, Conference South, Conference Step 7, 8. So I've played in them. Played in them all. It seems. So you can see the standards go up.
Yeah.
Crowds are huge. I was playing at St Albans. We were getting 1,700 fans at times, and sometimes that was more than what I was getting at Dagenham in the league. So the crowds are very good. Like I say, you've got ex-pros now that are dropping down, so you've got a bit of the seniority around, and you've got a lot of younger players that are trying to make their way up and try and get into the Football League. So the standards, I think, is really good. Crowds are good. Home and away, I've been to some great places, and I've been packed houses. So I would recommend it. I think obviously value for money is good. I think you can have a good laugh, because I think you feel more connected to the team. Whereas in the Football League now, especially the higher you go up, you get very separated because players are kept away. Where I think there's not many places you can go and suddenly have a beer with the team you've just watched, and have a chat. And I found it good. I've had a lot of a team locally to that in the league. Their fans, if they've not got a home game, will come. You get to have good conversations with people. So I'd thoroughly recommend it as a fan or as a player that's thinking, right, my time's done in the Football League. I would definitely drop into it, 'cause it's very enjoyable, and players are good, and for me, you just enjoy football again. I've gone sort of stripped it back, and you're not playing for the high pressure. The money's not a major thing. You play because you really enjoy and love the game of football.
And like you say, when you strip it back, non-league football has this kind of raw ingredient that potentially is unique from the EFL and the Premier League. And it is a melting pot of talented ex-pros coming in the game, but also, like you say, those bouncing back from academies. And I want to take it back to the beginning of your career. I alluded in the intro there that you got to turn down Sir Alex Ferguson. For anyone watching that might not know that story, can you tell us a little bit more?
It's basically, I was obviously young, sort of kid. I was playing for different clubs. I was at Southampton in the beginning, and then I sort of went to Norwich. I was about 14, playing for Norwich quite regularly, sort of school holidays and stuff. Still playing Sunday football for my local team, and then just got asked to go on trials, and I got asked to go on a trial at Man United. Went up there. I think I'd have been 14 or 15. Easter holidays played. Come back home, and the Man United scout basically said, look, they want to offer you a contract. So back then it was, rather than academy, it's apprenticeship. So you signed 2 years as an apprentice, and then you would hopefully get a pro contract. And they offered me a 2-year apprentice, 2-year pro. And Norwich did the same. So I was sort of in other people, but they were sort of my two options. And I just had a choice to make. And I'd been at Norwich probably 6 to 8 months anyway, as I'd been in the system and playing for them, and just sat down with my family, and my dad just said, look, it's your decision. I won't make any, I won't push you in any direction. I was a Man United fan, so you would assume I would choose Man United, but I didn't. I chose Norwich, and sensibly, I suppose, in my head, looked at it and thought, Man United, the big team at the time, they through Alex Ferguson hadn't got it going what he wanted. He was spending money buying players, and Norwich were, again, for the younger viewers wouldn't know, were a top Premier League team. They were finishing in Europe, but they were producing players, and I felt that I had a better chance of playing for Norwich, coming through the system, and then maybe I would be a star and make a move. So I decided to sign for Norwich, and then on that, we obviously told Man United I wasn't signing. I think it was a few days later, my phone rang in the house, and my dad picked it up and looked at me and said, Sir Alex Ferguson's on the phone. I sort of looked at him, and he basically questioned my dad and said, why has he turned us down? Because I don't think at the time many sort of young English players were turning Man United down. And my dad just said, look, he's made a decision, and obviously we've got to stick by it. And the story would sort of end there if the rest didn't carry on. But I would have been class of 92. And I would have been in that era. They obviously won the Youth Cup. And then 7 of their players went on to become established Man United in England and other nationalities, international. So it gets brought up a lot because within the group they didn't have a centre forward, and obviously I was at the time hotly tipped around England. So I look at it two ways. Would I have gone into that and become a superstar like them, or would I have fell by the wayside? I don't know. I often sit dreaming that I would have, become a big star like the rest of them. But you never know, I suppose. And I made the decision as a 15-year-old, and you have to stand by it.
And I think that is something that actually not a lot of people realise. Again, as a football support myself, like, the dream of ever being a professional footballer would be absolutely amazing. But I suppose it is really important when you've got a lot of different influences around you to remain loyal and to yourself and your own instincts when it comes to shaping your career. And you obviously went on to have, and still have, such a successful career at a number of different clubs. And I don't think it should be underestimated just how much dedication is required. Like, obviously you can have an optimum level of skill, but you have to be so driven. And I know you spoke about it earlier about the motivation really being just to play as high as you possibly can. But were there any other factors that you found when it came to making decisions about what move to make that really kind of were a key to your success?
Not really. I tried not to make moves for family reasons, because I think sometimes you can do that, family and everyone's happy, but then your football side isn't. And I think you ultimately, I looked at moves, I felt what was best for me career-wise. I think that was always my motivation. And I got stick of leave in certain clubs where I was happy. But I felt the move that was coming up career-wise was better. The club was a bigger club, I suppose. I had more chance of promotions if I moved to a club in the same division. So they were always my sort of motivations. I would talk to the manager, see what sort of squad they had. You would look at a number of things, I suppose, and speak to other people about them. Does the manager suit your character, and do they play a certain way that suits you? So sometimes I didn't always look at that, and I made a move and it didn't work, because you go into a system and you think you're going to be okay. The club, you look at a club and think, oh, they're flying and doing well, and then you go into the group and the dynamics doesn't work for you. So it's difficult. I have to say, you can't just jump at these moves because, like I say, some don't work. And I had a few that I moved to, and for whatever reason, form or just the way the system was, clash with managers didn't work out. But in general, I always looked at it, and the club I was at, I felt, right, are we going to go any further, or do I need to move to progress my career? And that was always the motivation. It was never, right, these offering me more money or, anything. And I would have moved around the country. I had no limitations of, anywhere. I stayed sort of southern, really playing, but I would have gone up north if I felt clubs were right. And I sacrificed my family for that in certain aspects. I mean, I moved and lived away from my wife for 2 years. I lived at my mum's house both times when I played for Exeter. And that was purely the fact. The first time was I was struggling for a club. I was 35 and I wanted to carry on playing. So it was like, right, I need to go and play. Exeter's giving me a lifeline. I want to go and play. And then I left and went to Leyton Orient. Didn't work out. And Exeter wanted me back. And I was like, look, I'm going to have to go back. So we had sort of a 3-year period. And for 2 of those years, I lived at my mum's and she lived back in Essex. So, football has taken me away from a lot of different things. And, you have to sacrifice so much for it. But I look at it and think at the end, it was worth it. We're living, you end up moving back together and things work out and stuff. And you just have to make decisions and sacrifices. And I could have made easy options and maybe at those sort of stages at 35 gone, well, I'll just go and play non-league then. And I'll go and sign for a club that I don't really want to, but I'll stay closer to home and stuff. So you always have to, or I've always have to push myself to try and play as high and as long as possible. And I suppose very, very selfish that I would sacrifice everything to go and still play football. And I think now dropping into non-league, not so much I wouldn't do it, but I'm sort of right, I don't have to do it for those reasons anymore. I can play for the love, the fun. Money's no issue. We just play and enjoy it. And I wouldn't move. When I left Stortford, I had offers to go all over the country again for good money. But I was like, I'm not going to go and put myself through that again. So, luckily, Hornchurch come up. I can still stay at home. So, now I would make different decisions. But back then as a pro, everything was about playing for the best club that I possibly could, you know, in the highest league I possibly could, and wherever that was and whatever it meant to anyone else, I was going to go and do that. So yeah, I've put my family and my missus through quite a lot, I suppose, in those respects. But I think they've realised that, you know, it wasn't going to last forever. So, you know, you have to go and do these things.
That's what is so unique and challenging being a footballer as a profession. And I think what is so great about this show is it gets us the opportunity for people that probably never even considered that level of sacrifice that a professional footballer has to get. When you've had a career like yourself and you see all those stats and all that success, underneath it is a story about a lot of sacrifice, a lot of dedication. And I just wanted to move the conversation over slightly in terms of potential failures in your career, or when periods that have been challenging or unsettling have helped mould you, not only as a footballer, but as a person. Are there any examples you can think of maybe a particular loss or a challenging period that you look back on now and are actually really grateful for because of the lessons it taught you?
I think the first sort of real downside I had was when I moved to South Korea. So I think that was probably the lowest. That's probably one of the lowest points of my career, and probably the first time everything had been. My career was moving well and was doing fine, and I think that's the biggest sort of period I had, where I was at the end of a contract at Reading. I had 3 brilliant years there. Got offered a new deal, and I'd basically split up from my ex missus. We had 2 kids, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I was at a point where football was really good, but my outside life wasn't. So I had offers all around the country from good teams in England, Championship and stuff. And then I had 2 options abroad. One was America and one was South Korea. And for the first time I looked at stuff and thought, do I just get away from everything? Money was a lot better than everything as well. And I felt I'm in a situation where I'm probably going to need more money, you know, from having 2 kids to support. And we weren't married, but obviously you got to still pay your way. So the decisions were made probably for the wrong reasons for the first time. And they really backfired, I suppose. And I moved out there, signed an 18-month contract. Football-wise was okay. The place was beautiful. You know, I have nothing against South Korea. I lived on a beach in a lovely apartment, and training facilities, the stadium, everything was unbelievable. But I was just not in the right place. I was too young. And it just didn't work. I was sat in an apartment sort of on my own for, you know, every day. And I had to make a decision. I think we went to December and then the season ended. So I come back and I just said to my agent, you know, I've got to get out of this, and I can't do this. So we had to give a lot of money back to get out of it. They demanded money for me. So QPR in the end bought me. And then I spent another probably year or season of recovering from that. So I think that was sort of, I probably wasted two years of my career from one move. And I think that was probably, I learned a lot about myself as a person, of thinking I can actually deal with being on my own, and I can deal with probably the worst thing I've dealt with, which was being away from my family and my kids. So I suppose when I come back and got through it, I was probably a lot stronger than what I thought I was. And it's helped me throughout. I think then being able to move to different clubs and live away from family, I think that probably that point helped me realise that I could do it. I mean, I've always been on my own. I left home at 15 to move to Norwich, so I've always known I was quite comfortable. But I think being so far away from everyone, I think that was a massive sort of learning curve for me. And coming back, it was like a case of fighting for my career again, because I signed for QPR and I did okay, not brilliant. We won a promotion and stuff, but I wasn't at the level I was at when I left. And I then went to Swindon and was sort of fighting again, trying to get form. And then thankfully I moved to Colchester, and it sort of clicked back in, and my career started to go where it was. But I'd probably wasted, I was 27 when I left, and my career didn't kick back in till 30. So I probably had two and a bit seasons of just people I think thought I was on the decline, where I look back and go, if I'd have just stayed at Reading, signed a 3-year contract, they got into the Premier League within that period, things would have been different. But I think that's, especially even now sitting here, it makes me feel that, you know, I can deal with most things now from having that period in my career, you know, having to deal with that.
It sounds like it really built your mental resolve and made you a really resilient person as well. And one thing, again, I always find quite fascinating when interviewing players, particularly for strikers, you have a fair amount of pressure on your shoulders. And did that kind of experience of going abroad and coming back also help when potentially you were going through goal droughts? Again, for anyone watching this that is a striker, maybe, you know, from a young player looking up. Sometimes it can be quite a lonely position when things just aren't going right. Did you ever have any sort of periods like that in your career?
I've had a few bad periods, I had a bad period at QPR when I come back, which you have to deal with. And then I had a bad period when I moved back to Norwich, my sort of latter stages of going through a bad run of form. I mean, I've always been very confident from a young kid when I started kicking the ball and from when I first started playing properly. I've always scored goals. I scored goals playing with my friends on the street. So I've always been someone that's been very confident in scoring goals. So as I've taken that throughout my career, so whenever I walk out onto a pitch, I expect myself to score.
Yeah.
And I've all scored 5 in 5, or I've not scored in 10. The next game I would walk out on the pitch and be confident in myself to do that. Obviously, when you're not in good form, you have those little doubts that do sort of semi creep in. When you are in good form, you don't think about anything, and anything you touch tends to fly in. But I think with it, you just have to keep backing yourself, because I think if you don't, and you don't accept the pressure that comes with being a centre forward, I enjoy that. I enjoy scoring a goal and everyone singing my name and me being the hero. I love that. So if you love that, you have to take the other way, that if you don't and you miss a sitter in the last minute, people are going to hammer you. So you have to be able to cope with both. And I've always just been that person that, you know, if there was a game that was thrown on today, I would walk out on the pitch and think, I'll score today. And I've not kicked a ball in 2 months, but I would be that way. And I think you as a centre forward, you have to be very selfish, very self-driven. You have to motivate yourself, and your confidence has to be at an all-time high all the time. If you start to have low periods and you lose confidence, for centre forwards, it's the worst thing, because you constantly then will think about the chances, and you constantly will snatch, and you don't become natural and just free. And I think you speak to any striker that when they're in rich frame of form, they just do everything they can. No, they don't think. Everything just becomes natural. They will hit shots that they wouldn't normally hit because they will think about it. And you need to get into that mode all the time. And if you're in that mode, then, you know, good strikers will be like that, and they'll score goals all the time. And I've had periods, definitely low ones, but I think you've always got to try and just get out of them as quick as possible. That's what I found. The longer they drag on, the worse it gets. The more you think about it, you then go home, start to get on your brain, and you start to drag it along. And if I'm in those sort of forms, I tend to maybe just watch some videos, watch some old footage, watch some goals, just after training, just go and hit the back of the net. Don't even worry about a goalkeeper. Just get used to hitting the net, get that feeling back. And then eventually, if you stick to that, something will happen. And they always say, you know, something will come off you and you'll hit a fluky one. But if you just keep that belief, then eventually you get through them. And the better strikers tend to not have as long a drought as the ones that probably aren't at that level, because you constantly start to think, and then, you know, before you know it, you're in a rut, and it's a real bad one. And it's not a nice place to be, because fans start to get on you, your players start to get on you, and, you know, sometimes you just obviously want the world to sort of swallow you up. But, you know, you have to accept that. I think as a striker, you have to accept the good and the bad. And I've always loved the good, so you have to accept the bad, and you have to take the pressure and say, right, I will be the man today. I will win us the game. You have to take that on, and I've enjoyed that. So, you know, there's no better feeling for me scoring a goal and everyone singing your name, and you come off the pitch and, you know, you've won the game. To me, there's no better feeling than that.
And I described you as a natural goal scorer because I think, well, I must confess as well, I've done some work for Margate, and you tended to be extremely prolific. I don't know
I think I've scored a few against them. Yeah.
Just a few every time. But also just watching the way that the tempo of a game could be going in one direction, but then just giving you an inch of space or a moment of lapse concentration, and you'd latch onto it. So to me, I would describe the key factors to being a good striker in terms of having that instinct, but like you say, that confidence. And do you think they're both inherent, and do you think they can be kind of coached into a player as much as it's natural?
I think it's difficult. You can coach technique and skill and all stuff like that, but then I suppose with me, it is an instinct. Like, I will look around while the game's going on, and put myself in positions where I think I'm going to get the best opportunity. It doesn't always happen, and sometimes the ball drops somewhere else, but the more you do it and the more you rely on your natural instincts, it's tended to work for me. I will make runs anticipating something that doesn't always come, but the time you do, you're normally in on goal and a chance falls. So I think that's hard to put into someone. I think if you talk about natural goal scorers, they all have some sort of instinct in them and a desire to put themselves in the right place, and a desire and a will and just want to die to score goals. I don't think you can give that to people. And I think at the moment, especially in the top levels, it's a dying art of being a number 9. I think everyone wants to be a 10, wants to get touches on the ball, wants to dribble, wants to, look like a Messi, they want to look like that, where I wasn't bothered. I think as a natural number 9, you don't get a lot of touches of the ball, and I don't mind that as long as I get the final touch. I don't care. I don't. But young lads nowadays, they all want to touch, they all want to dribble, they're past the ball and they don't run in the box. And so I think the dying art of an out and out goal scorer is sort of going, because the game's changed a bit. But for me, it's still the one thing that you have to do to win a football match. You need someone to score goals. So it's a shame that kids, I suppose, aren't thinking, I just want to do that. I don't care about nothing else. I don't mind if I don't touch the ball that often, but I might score 2 goals today. So yeah, I think it's in you personally. For the ones that score hundreds of goals, I think it has to be in you. I don't think you just turn up and you can go and do that. I think you have to have it in you to think, every time you walk on that pitch, I want to score a goal. And whether that means I touch the ball once today, but that one touch puts it in the net, I think that's hard to put into people. So yeah, it's. I look around, even now playing in the league, you can see the ones that are that type, and you can see the ones that are more, I don't mind. As long as I touch the ball, I have a step over, maybe nutmeg some. Those sort of ones of where someone goes, I don't care if it comes off my backside, my head, as long as I score a goal, I'm happy. And I've always been like that. I'm not too fussed about tricks and skills and whatnot. Mine is more play on as high up as possible.
Yeah.
Get me in the box. I come alive when I know there's a. I think it's like what you say, that game could be going on in a certain way, and it can change like that because of an instinct and because certain people come alive when there's things that can happen. And it might even be when everyone in the ground might think, well, there's nothing on, and then within a second someone's in and had a shot, and you think, well,
so true.
He's not moved for the first, and that's how I am. And people sometimes look at it as being lazy and whatnot, or unless you study it and watch it, you'll see that people move when they should move, and they move in the right timing and stuff like that. But within a game, you might not even see it, and then all of a sudden someone pops up and scores, and you're like, well, when did that happen? And that was me. And I think people would always look and think, as long as I'm on the pitch, there's a threat, and I should be worried that at any time he could, score a goal. And that's what my career's been about. And I think whenever I've played for someone or managers have brought me in, I'm a threat. I can, I can score goals. And you don't tend to get many of them, especially top level now, as much. I don't think. It's sort of like it's dying out a little bit. Hopefully it will come back.
It's really true. And even when I think of kind of non-league games that I've gone to in recent seasons, I remember Dorking Wanderers signing Jason Pryor and watching a couple of games where arguably, to me, he was having a quiet game. But on the 2 occasions, he came up with the match winner. And that's, again, why I guess strikers and prolific goal scorers are such a commodity, not only in the pro game, but in the non-league especially, because if you get one of those in your squad, that can be such a driving factor pushing for promotion. But you really touched upon something there in terms of the different roles within a team, number 9s, number 10s. And one thing that's quite notable in your career is that you formed some really, really good partnerships. If you were to look back on your career, is there a strike partner that you would play with every day of the week if you got the option to? Anyone that stands out, and why so? Because I guess building that dynamic between you and another player for the benefit of the team is very valuable.
I probably had 3 that I've had more than that, but 3 that stand out the most. Jason Roberts would be number 1. We had 2 and a bit years at Rovers. We both scored 20 plus goals every season when we played together. We were completely different types. He was real pace, power, strong. like to get the ball into feet, twist and turn, and then I played off of that, and it worked a treat. I could play with him all day, not a problem. Martin Butler was my other one who I played with at Reading. We had our one whole season together where I got 30 and he got 28, and he again was a workhorse that did so much running, held the ball up very well, and it just worked for me. You have different types, and I think when you blend them together, they work a treat. And then Chris Ulumu, who I played with at Colchester, same again, did very well with him, and he was an out and out 6'4" big man, one headers, flick things on. And in all those three, I won a golden boot with all three of them. So it's hard to pick one of them out.
Yeah. It's so funny because I've got the three of their names down here on my notes. So
and I've had other ones where I've done very well with, but I would say those three. Jason probably would be. I played with him, I played more games alongside him than the other two, and you can see the career he went on and had after that was outstanding. And I just think his type and my type blended very well. He occupied a hell of a lot of defenders, was quick, strong, could score, and that was the first time in my career that I'd actually had a partner. I was starting to pick my career up, and he was from non-league, come to Wolves, didn't really make it. We brought him in, so his career and both our sort of was steadily starting to rise, and it was great to play with him. And then the other two, like I say, were perfect for me, and it shows in my stats, my goal tally to win a golden boot with all three of them shows that they all work for me. And the good thing for me is it wasn't me that just scored. Chris scored, I think, 18. Martin Butler scored 24, and I think Jason would get in the 20. So it wasn't just I relied on them. I think I was good for them as well. So yeah, I would say those three, but probably Jason maybe just pips it.
And do you think it was during that time in your career that you built up an understanding of what you could contribute to not only your strike partner but to your teammates that maybe propelled your interest into coaching? Because I know that's something obviously later on in your career you went into. Is that what kind of triggered that passion, or had you always been quite interested in the coaching and technical side of the game?
No, coaching, I was never really thought about it, if I'm honest. I looked at it, but again, I was so focused on playing. So people would always tell me, start to prepare yourself for when it ends and do different bits and maybe start your badges and whatnot. And I was so just self-driven on playing. I didn't really think about a lot. I really enjoyed media, and I used to do loads of it, really enjoyed it. And in my head, my plan was to retire and go into media, whether that was TV or radio. And the problem was I didn't retire. So every time I got offered jobs, they were normally on a Saturday or on a Tuesday when I was playing. So I did as much as I could. I did a lot of radio for Norwich, and I've done BT and Sky and Talk Sport. So I'm still involved in it. And I think eventually that would be something I'd like to do. Whether I play for too long and I'm too old to do that as well, I don't know. But the coaching side was literally out of the blue. I got a phone call from Arsenal saying they'd like to basically interview me, and they'd like me to come down and work in their academy. And I sort of said, well, I've never coached. And at the time I hadn't done my badges, nothing. And they were like, no, we feel that for what your experiences and what you've done in the game, to bring that into a club and to our kids, that's more valuable than any badge. And I was like, right, okay. So I literally had to fast track my badge. So I went and did my level 2, went and did my UEFA B, and passed both of them, which then allows you then, so to speak, to work in the academy. And then I started working in there part-time. I did I think it was a Monday, Thursday, Saturday, and some Tuesdays. I did the under-16s as an assistant for 2 years. And it was unbelievable. From walking into the training ground the first day to speak to everyone, it was like walking into a first-team training ground. The facilities, the staff, just everything they had. It was sort of like, if you're any good as a footballer and you've got the right attitude, then you shouldn't fail, because you've got no excuse. Everything is here on a plate. So that was really good. I got to work with some really good kids, some really good coaches. Some of the boys now, I work with Bukayo, who's obviously Saka, who's playing in the first team. He was in the 16s when I first went in. Didn't work with him loads because he was being pushed up because he was so good. And there's a few now that are in the would be first year scholars that are pushing second year scholars. I did some bits with the 18s, so a lot of them are with the 23s. So it was interesting working with them. There's some very talented players within that group, and you can see at Arsenal that they're starting to funnel them through. And it was just an eye opener about coaching. I'd never done it. I've always been the player, always had to listen. To then suddenly be the coach, and you want their respect, you want them to listen. I suddenly realised that I've been a bit of a pain to a lot of my managers. That was the biggest thing I learned, and I sort of have apologised to a lot of managers that I'd worked with to say sorry for being such a pain, because I realised how hard this job is now. And that was a big thing. It was a real eye opener of putting sessions on, planning. You sort of thought as a player that you just turn up and go and train, and you don't actually think of what goes on in the background, the thought process of managers, why they do things, I suppose why they think about stuff. So all different things. And I was like a bit like, all I ever used to do was moan about stuff and really sort of hammer managers about structure and planning and stuff. And, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? All different things. And you don't sort of think until you go into it of sort of the why the management might do things. And sometimes I felt, oh, why aren't I playing today? Why am I not involved today? Why are we focusing on this player more today? And you suddenly realise now that managers would think and say, well, this player's been struggling a bit, so we've had to work on that. But as a player, you turn up to go and train, and you don't obviously get told this. So you just look and think, well, this is rubbish. I've not kicked a ball today, but he's had everything. And then until you now go into coaching and you realise that these things are planned, that you think, oh, okay, I do apologise to a lot of you for kicking balls away and moaning about stuff. So it was a big eye opener, definitely.
Yeah, and it's absolutely fascinating to hear as well how making that coaching move opened your eyes. And I want to ask you a bit about making that move into management. But firstly, just to say what an absolute credit it is to you in your career as well, that you get a phone call like that from Arsenal and the opportunity to work with those players. And did that then in turn, because I mean, if it wasn't a challenge enough, kind of sustaining the level of your career that you did into the non-league game, you then decided to be a player manager.
Terrible.
How was that? Because like you have just alluded to yourself, it's pretty tough going being a non-league manager.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I suppose I was playing for Stortford and I'd been there a year under Kevin Watson. He'd left at the end of the season and I didn't know sort of what I was doing. So I was speaking to other teams. They brought a new manager in and I'd had no phone call. So I was like, okay, am I staying at Stortford or not? So I rang Steve Smith, who was the owner. And I think the club felt that I would leave because Kev Watson had left and he was a good friend of mine. And I was like, no, I'm happy to stay. So Steve spoke to the new manager he brought in. He was happy for me to stay if I wanted to. So it was brilliant. We signed and everything was good. Got to about 10 games in and we were struggling really bad. We got knocked out of the FA Cup away at St. Neots and we were terrible. Steve Smith come onto the pitch, went crazy. And he'd have sort of pulled me a few times and said, look, if this isn't going right and I decide to pull the plug, are you happy to step in? And I was like, well, yeah, not a problem. If that's what you think you're going to do, you're the owner. And if you think things aren't going right, not a problem. So we had another game, I think away at Kingstonian, and we were 2-0 down half time. And I'm thinking, oh, God, he's got potential to come in the change rooms and do something. We get back to 2-2. I was like, thank God, I think I scored 2 and we were fine. And then we conceded.
Of course, you scored the 2, Jamie.
So at least I was doing my job. And then 95th minute or something. And I'm fuming. I'm one of them very sort of vocal. I've always been it, not just because a senior player. I would go mad if I don't think things are right and, say my bit. And it was one of them. I thought, what's going to happen? So we had the team talk and then that was it. We're all sat in the change rooms. And I could see the manager sat afar in the dugout on his own. And I'm thinking, oh, no. I saw Steve walk over to him. Next thing I got pulled on the pitch and he said, right, I'm going to let him go. Me and you are going to take over. So I was like, okay. And I knew Steve now a year and a bit. He was the owner. I knew he'd managed other clubs that he'd been at. I was like, okay. So we basically got appointed. I was appointed joint manager alongside him, joint player manager. We then had one of the best seasons we've had. We missed out on the playoffs by 3 points. And things were good. It got me used to, I knew the boys anyway, but it got me used to speaking to them before a game. Got me used to looking at the team selection, the tactics, different bits. There were times when Steve wasn't there, so I was on my own solely. So I did a lot of it as well. And I got the taste for it. I really enjoyed it. And then we basically started this season the same. And we started well. I think we won a couple. Then we got on a losing streak of 5. And Steve pulled me and said, I'm going to step aside. You take it. I was like, right, okay. So we got that. And then the boys, I said, look, this is what's happening now. Me and my coach are going to take over. Steve's going to step aside. So typical non-league, stepped aside. I got pulled in the Thursday before my first game. And they said, we're cutting the budget by £850.
Oh, welcome to non-league management, that
and
is, isn't it?
I was like, okay. I said, so you've given me it. You said you're going to support me. He said, but that's the case. You've got to find the money. You either got to get rid of £850 as players, or you got to find it. So the boys are trained at that point. I walked into the change rooms and explained the situation. And I said, listen, we've got 2 options. We either take a pay cut together to keep everyone, or we've got to lose players. So fair play to them. They all said that they take a cut. And I said, look, we'll do it on a percentage of wages of what we can do and what we can. So I think I went back to him with £700, near enough. So we thought, brilliant. We then played Horsham in my first game. We were top, hadn't lost. We beat them 2-0. Then we beat Wingate. And now I'm thinking, this is brilliant. And just things sort of steadily went along from there. And that was sort of my induction into it full time. But I knew about non-league, and I knew how harsh it could be, and I knew how things can change very quickly. 7 days in for players, you know all of that. But it just gave me a big insight into managing the group. And I'd already coached, and I'd now started to manage, and I'd always felt I was a better manager than a coach. I've always felt I can deal with people better, individually, man management, how to speak to them. And I felt as long as I've got that for me, and then I've got a good coach, then tactically we'll be. I really enjoyed it, I have to say. And then it come to an end. Steve wanted to move the club in a different direction. He come in, pulled me, and said he was going to come back and take over. I could be a player, but then there would be nothing for me sort of after that. And I just felt a bit let down because I'd sort of been there 2 years. The period he had stepped aside, I was doing everything. I was sometimes there as a manager, a player, and a coach, and I would do the warm up, do the kit, be the manager. And you sort of think, well, I know you don't obviously deserve stuff and what, but a bit more sort of loyalty and respect would have been, I would have felt a bit better. And I had a 7-dayer come in for me from Hornchurch.
Very shrewd move by them.
Yeah, and I was still manager at the time.
Oh wow!
I don't know. Yeah, no one knew. So I sort of said to them, I said, look, I'm really happy where I am. I'm manager. Obviously, I'll speak to Steve, and they basically put it across to me of saying that this is where we see you. And I was like, okay. I said, well, if I'm being treated as a player at this point, and you're asking me as a player to go and speak to Hornchurch, I'm going to go and speak to Hornchurch. They're third in the table. We've got a chance of promotion. If I'm only being here at Stortford as a player, I've got to decide. If you're telling me that I'm going to be the manager and I'll be the manager next year, no matter what money Hornchurch offer me, I've got a future here. So I had to sort of look at it as a player, and I went and signed for them. So I was disappointed because I'd had options in the summer to go to speak to other clubs. I nearly spoke to Margate as a man player.
Oh, totally.
So I had actually options, and they were better offers and stuff. And I'd spoke to Stortford, and they were like, "No, this is where we see you." So I turned other stuff up in the summer previous. So you sort of feel you expect it in football, unless you sign a contract. These things happen. But I really enjoyed the management side. Really did. I've had offers at the moment about it. People saying would I consider still doing it. I think I can still play and manage as long as I've got the right coaches around me. So I don't see that as a problem. And I think especially in non-league, it helps with the budget because you can have a manager and a player in one. Yep. So I think that helps. And I've always felt as long as I can contribute as a player, then I would. And I think it might be the role that I'd maybe start to go into or look to go into because, like I say, I've enjoyed it. I think I've got used to the players that are in it. I've got a lot of contacts within it. A lot of my friends are managers, and it would just be the right club. Now it would be down to the right club who would put something in front of me, and it would have to be some sort of project or challenge. I'd have to be at a club where I felt we can move forward and we've got an opportunity to achieve something, rather than just come and play and manage at any club. That would be the plan. But the coaching side and the management side really has put me in a position where I didn't think I'd be. Yeah, I didn't think I'd be. And I think, especially at those levels, they're good levels. You get good crowds. You know, there's nice stadiums you go to. The level of players that you can bring in. Again, it will come down to budgets. I've learned that. You need a decent budget to normally the teams at the top are normally the ones with a decent budget. So you'd have to have a budget that could you'd feel you could compete. But yeah, it definitely give me a buzz. The management side I did really enjoy, and it allowed me to still play. I didn't think it was a problem because I had good coaches. So that might be the route. I don't know at the moment what's going to happen because of where we are with the season. I'd love to stay at Hornchurch and have a crack at it, but if an opportunity comes up that, again, I feel is too good to turn down, then we'll look at that as well.
That's absolutely fascinating insight there. I think in the last couple of minutes you've given any viewer that didn't have an insight into what being a non-league manager is like you say, those kind of pre-game meetings with the chairman and all the goings on. It can be quite mercenary. And I think you might have answered it already. And I don't want you to give away any exclusives, but when the 2020-21 season does begin, can we expect you to go and don your boots again? Or
yeah, I think so.
Is that the plan? Good.
Yeah, I think so. I've always said that unless my body can't do it anymore, or I get an opportunity within football that I have to retire, and it's a job that will take me, the next 10 years of my life, then I would retire. Other than that, I'll keep playing. So hopefully it will be just as a player, because I actually did quite enjoy going to Hornchurch and just being a player, because I'd been involved as a manager and everything. To just go and play, turn up and think, I can just worry about scoring goals today, helping my team, rather than is the kit right? Is their players on time? And everything else you think about, you're looking at your watch, who's not here? And it was quite nice to turn up, sit down, let the manager do his bit, go and play. That would be ideal. Or a player manager role would be ideal. So either way, I think unless something comes out of the blue in the summer to say, look, here's a full-time job, you're going to have to retire, I would think once the new season kicks off that I'll either be a player or a player manager, hopefully.
Oh, well, that's fantastic. I am sure there are a lot of people tuning in that are delighted to hear that. I think when this goes out, your phone will probably not stop ringing. So apologies for that. But
that's okay.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
That's okay. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, really fascinating to hear from you, and I'm sure our viewers will feel the same. But I hope you carry on keeping safe and enjoying this downtime. And we get to see you playing again soon.
I hope so. If it carries on, I'll end up retiring. It'll be too long, won't it? So.
Fingers crossed not. And thank you to everyone that has tuned in to our Journey show this episode. Make sure you subscribe to Official BOTN on YouTube to be the first to get the alerts for when our content is going out live. And don't forget, you can engage on our social media channels as well. We would always love to hear from you. But until next time, take care.